On today's episode, Rockford IceHogs broadcaster Mike Folta joins the show for a preview of the Rockford IceHogs this season and some key players to keep an eye on for the Blackhawks minor league affiliate. All that and plenty more right here on Locked On Blackhawks.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? Welcome on into another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, just a reminder to go and smash that like button, comment down below, and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. The start of the regular season is just 5 days away, Blackhawks fans, and you don't want to miss out on all the latest news and updates pertaining to Connor Bedard and the Chicago Blackhawks. Joining me today, I have the great honor of having none other than Rockford IceHogs broadcaster Mike Folta on the show. You might recognize him as the play-by-play man or also just some other IceHogs related content on social media. Mike, thank you so much for the time. I greatly appreciate it. How are you doing? And are you as pumped that hockey season is finally here as I am?
Yeah, Jack, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. And I think I said it on the broadcast of our preseason game the other night. Hockey season's not really around the corner; it's here, and so we're excited to, ramp up for that. Our regular season starts a little after the Blackhawks does. Our first game's on October 13th out in San Jose. So we're revving it up here in the preseason and in training camp, and ready to get this ship out to sea.
Absolutely. We were talking a little bit off air about how it's finally nice to have some actual concrete news. And obviously the IceHogs have some guys being sent down. They're starting to form their team as well. It's an exciting time of the year for sure. And Mike, before we actually get into the Rockford IceHogs, though, I did want to ask you a little bit about kind of your path and how you ended up in Rockford, Illinois, of all places. I did read that you're an Indiana native, a Purdue grad, but can you talk a little bit about how you became a broadcaster, how this kind of became a career for you, and also why the sport of hockey?
Yeah, I'm a good old Indiana boy. So I went to Purdue. Actually, went to school to do something other than broadcasting. Was going to get into engineering, and then had always liked calling games, and started doing it more and more in college, and kind of fell in love with it. Realized it's what I wanted to do, and I graduated in 2020, which of course the world kind of stopped, and broadcasting jobs were scant, as were all jobs. And so after, I was living at home. I was working in an Amazon warehouse, just putting boxes on conveyor belts for about 10 hours a day. And I finally got my first pro hockey kind of opportunity as an unpaid intern. I went down and worked with the Florida Everblades in the ECHL. So I got my start in pro hockey calling the Florida Everblades road games remotely. So I wasn't traveling with the team. I was calling these games remotely. And this is an ECHL feed, right? It's not the NHL network studio where you have 56 different angles. I was calling these games off of, 35, 40-inch monitor, where sometimes like somebody is standing up in the back row in front of the camera and you can't speak much. But that's where I got my start, and from there made the jump to Atlanta. Had a full-time job there, and then after a year and a half in Georgia, made the jump up here to the AHL and the Blackhawks organization. And it's good to be back in the Midwest, that's for sure. I definitely miss the ECHL South Division. Some great port cities down there that we got to visit in the cold hockey months.
Wow, that's a cool kind of full circle type of situation that you've gone through. And I was going to ask you too about your time in the coast. I saw you put in some work down there with the Everblades and with the Atlanta Gladiators. What was kind of that experience like, being around hockey in the South? And obviously Atlanta had a team for a while. There's been some like discussions potentially about returning there maybe. What was kind of your experience like, and what did you kind of learn about everything down there?
Yeah, that was a wild experience my last few months in Atlanta, because there started to be all these rumors about the NHL potentially returning to that city. And it's a great sports town. They love their Braves. They love their Georgia Bulldogs. The Thrashers just never really stuck. Part of that was was ownership. Part of that was where the games were located. Downtown is kind of hard to get to for the hockey base in the northern part of the city. And Anson Carter, actually, one of the TNT analysts on NHL on TNT, he was actually part of the ownership group that bought the Gladiators, the team I worked for the last few months that I was there in Atlanta. And so that was a pretty wild time when those rumors are swirling and you're starting to get this NHL flavor that's creeping into an ECHL organization with the Gladiators. And, myself as a young 20-something was kind of right in the middle of it, maybe a bit out of my depth at times, but it was certainly fun to hear those rumors. And I think they're still going. I think Kevin Weeks put out a tweet just the other day that plans are moving forward with some of their construction projects out there in Forsyth County. So big things could be happening in Atlanta. I don't have really any more inside information than that, but be a part of it.
Yeah, I'm still seeing those rumors as well. I actually sent it to my dad. He grew up in Atlanta and was an Atlanta Flames fan back in the day when they were still a thing. So he's all for hockey coming back to Atlanta. But I definitely wanted to ask you as well, kind of about how, I know you've only been here since December, but how has this first year in Rockford treated you? How has it been getting the call for an AHL team as, you've made your way up from the ECHL?
Yeah, I wouldn't say like the call of the game changes too much. Obviously, the speed of the game is faster, really. It's kind of everything else. I mean, in Atlanta, we were pretty insulated where that was an ECHL team that was trying to win an ECHL, Kelly Cup championship. And here in Rockford, obviously the IceHogs are owned by the Blackhawks, and you're part of a much larger organization and a much larger operation. And you notice too, just the differences in resources. One of the mantras for Mark Bernard, our GM here in Rockford, is no excuses. He doesn't want the players to have any excuses. He wants everyone to have everything that they need to compete and go out and play to the best of their ability. And so, I mean, they take care of you really well here in Rockford. We're very blessed on that front, and that's a pretty big step up to kind of what you got used to in the ECHL when there's just different levels of resources available.
And then can you kind of share with us, have you had any like super cool moment with Rockford so far where it's almost been kind of like a pinch me type of thing, or what's been kind of your coolest moment? That's the first thing that comes to mind when I ask you that question.
Well, I got here in January, right, of last year. So I was drinking out of a fire hose the first few months. I would say that the whole second half of the season was kind of a pinch me moment. I think a recent one that comes to mind would have been getting to attend the rookie showcase or the prospect showcase, if you will, up in St. Paul with the Blackhawks. That was really cool to be around, not just the Blackhawks, their full prospect list, not quite the full one, but many of those prospects, but then also the staff, and to see how, the communications and things like that are set up at the highest level in our sport. That was really cool to see. Very thankful for that opportunity that came just a couple weeks ago.
Tom Curver's Prospect Showcase is always one of my favorite times of the year. Last year it was in Chicago at Fifth Third Arena, and I always think it's an awesome opportunity just to get, you're with the prospects more than we see them up here in Chicago, but it's a cool idea to see, or a cool opportunity, I guess, to see kind of how these guys have developed within the last year, where they're making strides, where their progression has been. So that's always been a favorite of mine as well, and cool to hear that you had all good things to say about the experience up in Minnesota with the Blackhawks organization as well. But let's get into the Rockford IceHogs. You mentioned you joined the team down in January. You got to see this team play some meaningful hockey. And to me, that's kind of been so refreshing to hear these last couple of seasons, because for far too long, and it's just kind of a downfall of competing for Stanley Cups. You got to focus on the big boys, and the prospect pool winds up getting neglected a little bit, but more so than just seeing these guys play meaningful hockey. It's nice that there's an actual plan and structure set in place. What did you kind of think about that young, tight-knit group last year? It felt like when I talked with Ryder Rolston, when I had him on the show, when I talked with Joey Anderson, both guys weren't, around for very long, but they spoke very highly about the group that they had there. Can you kind of tell us what you liked from that team last season on and off the ice?
Yeah, it was a great group. Everybody was extremely welcoming. You mentioned a couple of the guys right there that could be potentially around again this season. As we're speaking right now, Anderson's still up with with the Blackhawks, but we just got to see Rolston the other night in a preseason game. So it was really fun to be around him. And you said, yeah, it was a young team. It's going to be a young team again this year here for Rockford, especially on the blue line, but really all throughout. Goaltending as well is going to be really young. Last season, the IceHogs had Arvid Soderblom, who it was his second year in Rockford, but he'd also played professionally in Sweden a little bit as well. This year, goaltending-wise in Rockford, you're looking at potentially Drew Comesso, Jackson Stauber just came down the other day, and Mitchell Weeks is an interesting prospect as well. He's been up and down with the ECHL and the AHL, but really the IceHogs don't get into the postseason without what Mitchell Weeks brought to the table last year. So, in my opinion, it's kind of I don't want to say a 3-horse race, but there's 3 guys that the IceHogs fans should expect to see at some point in net for Rockford. But you're pretty young in that position, and the good news is you're bringing back a couple of your big boys. You're bringing back, not maybe the biggest physically, but scoring-wise, David Gust and Brett Sini, 2 guys who earned their way into some NHL call-ups last season, 2 guys who were AHL All-Stars last year, the 2 leading scorers for Rockford. They come back to help carry the mail this year. And it was a young team last year, but we had a great veteran presence as well. Captain Garrett Mitchell had been here for several seasons. He's just basically the consummate pro, the consummate captain, everything you'd want in an AHL leader. And then Buddy Robinson as well. He scored that fateful goal against Pittsburgh. But he was a big leader in the room for Rockford for a lot of the season. And he scored a big goal in the playoffs to send us on to the next round. And so you saw the older guys and the veteran guys and more experienced guys step up and make a lot of the plays. And I think there's a big opportunity this year for a lot of the young guys to maybe take over, kind of like what we saw Isaac Phillips and Alex Vlasic do. Those 2 guys were named alternate captains towards the end of the year after some of the previous players who had worn the A ended up being dealt away at the trade deadline. It was, a 21-year-old Vlasic and a 21-year-old Phillips who were wearing the A, and head coach Anders Sorensen was saying that they earned it. And, they're not the most experienced guys, but they were leaders in that room. They were amongst the leaders in that room. And now both of those guys have a shot in the NHL. We hope for them. And it's time for some new guys to step up here in Rockford.
Yeah, we're definitely excited about the futures of both Alex Vlasic and Isaac Phillips at the NHL level. But I was going to ask you as well about David Gust and Brett Sini, 2 guys who are kind of in different spots considering it is a young group down in Rockford. Once again, they maybe don't have the NHL futures that others do, but can you kind of talk about how important they are to this team and how much they mean and how big of an impact it is to still have those veteran presence, even though you're trying to build towards the future? You still need those guys to, produce on the ice and also to help guide the youngsters in this next wave of talent that's coming in and teaching them how to be everyday pros.
Oh, I mean, they were huge. I mean, you could just look at the score sheet. Like they were putting up points pretty much every night. And they were playing together and basically made up one of the most dangerous top lines in the entire AHL. They were outstanding. They played with Lukas Reichel a lot. They played with Luke Philp quite a bit, a guy who unfortunately tore his Achilles in the offseason. We won't get him back until maybe February or so. But they were amazing for Rockford. A fun thing too was that they were jump starters and were true leaders. When the IceHogs needed a spark, those guys would bring it. Sometimes you think of maybe your 3rd or 4th line providing that spark, going out and making a big hit. I remember a game in March, we were playing against Colorado's affiliate, the Colorado Eagles, and we had just got waxed 6-2 on home ice the night before. The next night on Saturday, David Gust, who is maybe 5'10", $185, something like that, like well-built, athletic guy, but is not one of the heavyweights.
Right.
First shift of that next night, Gust goes out and lines up one of their top scorers and totally sets the tone for the game, and we end up winning in overtime. So they're leaders in the score column, but they're also leaders like that where they know what they need to do to kind of get the team going a little bit.
And then obviously there are a lot of new faces going to be coming down to Rockford again this season. Are there any in particular that you have a star next to their name, or who are kind of the guys that you're most excited to see for Rockford this season?
Well, I think Jalen Lipin is a really interesting guy to keep an eye on. He's going to be in the 73 car for Rockford this season. We got to see him at the very end of the year. He played a couple playoff games for Rockford. He's not a huge guy. He's a 7th round pick a couple years ago by the Blackhawks, but he's really good on the puck. He's got good instincts, and he's a water bug out there. He just seems to always be in the right spots. He didn't end up scoring in those postseason games against Texas at the end of the year, but I'm not sure it's fair to lean on him to be a scoring leader, but I'm really intrigued to see what he brings. He's looked really good in camp so far here in Rockford. He kind of stands out as one of the better skaters of the guys that we have down with us right now.
Yeah, Jalen Lipin's always been an intriguing prospect these last couple of seasons. Missed some time in his final year of junior hockey after being a 7th-round pick, but he's shown some flashes and shown a very high compete level and good skating as well. So keep an eye on him, Blackhawks fans, down with the IceHogs this year. For me, and he hasn't been someone that I've been high on these last couple of years, Mike, and I'll be the first to admit it, but Nolan Allen's ascension in the last, just even from when I saw him at training camp and in the preseason last year, he's always looked like a grown man. That's always been the one thing that stood out about Nolan Allen is 18, 19 years old. He looks like he's 30, but it feels like the confidence and the skating has really improved. He's someone that I'm super excited about. And we've seen a lot of young defensemen coming through the system the next few years. It feels like he and Ethan Del Mastro, in my opinion, are the two to be watching a close eye on in Rockford this year.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a young decor, right? How about two rookies coming in? Two guys who I'm not going to say they would replace Vlasic and Phillips, maybe 1-for-1, but kind of in that similar boat, right? Two guys with golden opportunities, each of them to make huge impacts on the back end for Rockford. Got to see Nolan Allen the other night in preseason against Iowa, and it wasn't the best night for Rockford on the ice preseason-wise. The Hogs lost 6-2, but Allen was out there quite a bit, and one thing that stands out is his he's got an active stick and he's got good lateral movement as well.
Yes,
really effective, and he might not maybe blow by you like a Phillips would or a Vlasic would, but just very effective in his own zone on a night where the IceHogs were not very effective as a group. But you're absolutely right. It'd be really fun to watch him. Del Mastro, a bigger body, right? And we haven't seen him yet in preseason as we're recording this now, but looking forward to hopefully seeing him throughout the year. And both of them having the opportunity to ripen in Rockford and make a big impact on a blue line where there are some question marks, to be honest.
I know it wasn't the best start to the IceHogs in the preseason, falling 6-2 to the Iowa Wild. You just referenced some things about Nolan Allen. Did you have any other takeaways other than the final score, obviously? Was there any other guys that you thought stood out in the first game of preseason action?
Yeah, the IceHogs didn't have the puck a whole lot. It wasn't. I think we got maybe doubled up in shots. Those are all unofficial, but that's what it looked like and what it felt like. Iowa played really well. I got to give them credit. And one of the goalies that I mentioned a little bit ago, Mitchell Weeks, he let in 6 goals. I think he stopped 29 of 35, something like that. But he looked really strong, I thought. And one thing that was really encouraging from Weeks, but also from the IceHogs as a group, was the compete level. They were down 5-1 coming into the third, and they put a good few shifts together to open up the third period when they were down 4 goals. Now, a few shifts later, they gave up the 6th of the night. But you like to see your group come out and put a good foot forward, even when you're down behind big like that, especially in preseason. But Weeks looked pretty good. He's got a lot of raw potential you can see, and I think Matt Smith, our goaltending development coach, is excited to start to refine him. And he might start in Indy. Not sure where he's going to be at the Open, but the IceHogs have a couple options here in goal to go to.
And I do think it's with the youth that's going to be in net with Rockford this year with Jackson Stauber and Drew Comesso. Correct me if I'm wrong. Mitchell Weeks put up really good numbers in the ECHL last year, correct? Which isn't typically a goalie-friendly league, right?
Yeah, I mean, he started the year in Wheeling, West Virginia. It's a small town in the mountains of West Virginia, and he had pretty good numbers in the ECHL, but they didn't really drop off at all when he got to the AHL. They're actually pretty similar. And last year with India, I don't want to say he was dominant. That was a team that kind of was one of the lower seeds getting into the playoffs, kind of similar to where Rockford was in the playoff seeding, if you will. So towards the middle of the pack. But he had pretty good numbers. And I believe by the end of the year, he might have led the IceHogs in goals against average. You might have to fact check me on that. Now, he didn't start as much as Arvid Soderblom, right? So a smaller sample size, but he had a winning record, and like I said earlier, without his contributions, especially earlier in the year, Rockford doesn't win enough games to make the postseason.
And keeping on the goalie talk, obviously Arvid Soderblom is now getting that first opportunity to be a full-time NHLer after spending a majority of the last 2 seasons with Rockford. He did come up a couple of times due to injury, but the plan's been to be developing him these last 2 years. And I know you were only there in January, but did you see anything in particular that makes you feel like Arvid Soderblom is ready to take that next step, that he's ready to be a full-time NHLer and be the backup for the Blackhawks this season?
Absolutely. I think more than anything, he's got the mindset and the mental capacity to do it. I've said it on some different programs, but I've had a chance a couple of times to be at ice level when Arvid Soderblom is getting ready to take the ice and for warmups or what have you. And at that point, everybody's locked in, right? Like everybody's kind of going through their mental checklist before they rev up the engines. But watching Arvid down there, like, man, and those all black pads, it felt like I was looking at just this giant Swedish Darth Vader or something. Like it was scary seeing him get dialed in. And the way that he dealt with adversity this year, I thought was really mature. He's still in his young 20s, right?
Yeah.
But he's got a young son as well, like a great guy off the ice. And he handled adversity really well last year. For the first time ever, he got injured last year. Like he dealt with a groin injury and he missed some time, and he really wasn't himself as he was coming back from that injury. And Rockford rode him. I mean, he was the workhorse for the IceHogs. He started the last 9 games of the season. He started 3 games in 3 days to end the year when we needed to
forgot about that.
Those games. And one thing that I've made a note of this before, but it's one of my favorite stats from last year, is that Arvid was his best in the biggest moments. He was outstanding in shootouts and in overtime. I believe the number was 944. And again, I could go back and get that note, but I want to say he had a 944 save percentage in 3-on-3 overtime. And so
wow.
I don't know what the league average is on that, but your save percentage is not supposed to go up in a 3 format. And so him playing his best in those crucial moments, and Rockford went to overtime a lot this last year, so that's a pretty big sample size. He was great in those crucial moments when you need a save. And he really – we talked about Mitchell Weeks getting Rockford to the playoffs. I mean, the IceHogs rode Arvid Soderblom into the postseason for sure.
Well, that's definitely good to hear, because I know the Blackhawks are super excited about his future. And even though there's a lot of goalies in the pipeline, you got Stauber, you got Comesso, Adam Guyan was obviously the first goaltender off the board in the 2023 NHL draft. But the Blackhawks supposedly have feeling that Soderblom could be the guy of the future. So definitely excited to see what he's all about in his first full NHL campaign. Mike, I got one more question for you before I let you go and enjoy the rest of your Thursday. I got to ask you about Lukas Reichel, because obviously he figures to be a key piece of the Chicago Blackhawks, not only this season, but as they keep climbing and taking those next steps in the rebuild. I'm curious, down the stretch of last season when he was with Rockford, did you see any signs of him kind of taking a leap or maybe reaching a next level? Because I don't know if it was just a matter of him getting experience or gaining more confidence at the NHL level, but his last NHL stint compared to the first 2 were absolutely night and day. And it just looked like he was a completely different player. Were there any flashes of that down in Rockford, or do you think it was just kind of the maturation process of understanding the NHL level a little bit more?
Yeah, I don't really think there was anything here in Rockford that maybe led to that increase of NHL success. Now, I mean, I don't want to speak for him, right? But I didn't notice anything from the outside that would have, alerted me to the fact that, he could be a 60-point guy in the NHL, or that's what he was on pace for last year. I will say this, I think maybe the line that everybody assumes of a young, talented, offensive-minded player is, we need to develop the defensive side of their game. And while with Reichel that was true, one of the things that Andrew Sorensen and the group here in Rockford was trying to develop last year with him was how he responded to adversity, not just over the course of the season, but within a shift as well. And bouncing back from something negative that happens was something that the team was wanted to see more out of him on. And that's probably where I saw the most growth out of him this year, was within a shift or within a game. If you have a bad shift or if you make a bad play, how do we bounce back from that, put it in the rear view, and find a way to contribute to a winning effort the rest of the night?
And with Lukas Reichel being 21 years old at the NHL level, those things are going to happen, but it's about responding and figuring out how you put it together on the next shift. And I know we're all excited to see Lukas go through those battles at the center position as he's getting an opportunity there. Do you feel like that's, I guess, sidebar, second to last question. What did you make of the decision to give Lukas Reichel the opportunity to play down the middle to open up the season?
Well, I love it because the more times he's on the puck, the better. Like with his ability to create, and I got to see it firsthand a lot with guys like Cini and Gust, but we'll get to see it with the Blackhawks with guys like Kurashev and Athanasiou. It is awesome to watch when he's in a groove and when he's comfortable distributing, because he's a guy who can take over a game in that sense at the AHL level, and he showed some flashes of it at the NHL level. Jack, it's really interesting on the IceHogs podcast on Hog Talk. We had somebody write in. We have a what if segment, and I'm not sure who it was. I think it might have been Lori out in Rockton who wrote in a what if, and she said, "What if Lukas Reichel leads the Blackhawks in scoring this year?" And I was like, "Whoa! Like let's pump the brakes here." But then you kind of think through and you do some of the math, and it's maybe not the most likely scenario, right? But if he continues that success that he had last year, then I don't think it's that crazy of a proposition. I mean, if he's going to be playing second line center minutes, he gets some power play time, and he has himself a 60-point season. I think Max Domi led the Blackhawks last year with 49. And he wasn't
tough times.
For a couple months. Yeah, so who knows? But we're excited to see what he does with the Hawks this year.
I don't think that's that crazy either, considering that he's kind of at a point, and we've seen it in the preseason. Connor Bedard, the upside is absolutely undeniable, and his ceiling is higher than Lukas Reichel's. But right here, right now, considering Bedard's still figuring out those adjustments, while Reichel has already gone through some of that, and I think Reichel's outplayed Connor Bedard at times. He hasn't outproduced him, which is kind of the crazy thing about Bedard. I don't even think he played all that well on Tuesday night, and he still had 3 points. But Lukas Reichel, I think, has looked better, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's knocking on the door to be the Blackhawks' leading scorer either this season. He's going to be a lot of fun to watch one way or another.
Yeah, we're happy for him up there, and here in Rockford, we're hoping that we don't see him.
Yeah, right. Hopefully, we'll be developing in these next couple of years another player with the upside that Lukas Reichel has flashed these last couple of seasons. Mike, want to say thank you again for taking the time and for also helping me get members of the Rockford IceHogs here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. That's really awesome of you, man. Thank you again, and looking forward to our next chat.
Absolutely, Jack. Yeah, we'll be talking throughout the season, so it should be a fun one.
Start of the Rockford IceHogs season is right around the corner following the Chicago Blackhawks. Make sure to go and check out the Hogs Talk podcast. You can go and find Mike. What's your Twitter account?
It's Mike_Folta, I believe. Yeah.
Make sure to go and check that out for all the latest updates on the Rockford IceHogs. Once again, everyone, Mike Folta, play-by-play broadcaster for the Rockford IceHogs.